guys, it's Jamie from Not So Wimpy Teacher. And I don't want to be cheesy or anything, but this is the truth. Chatting with you guys is one of my favorite things. So I'm really excited for the opportunity to talk to you today about differentiating your vocabulary instruction to help those learners who are struggling with vocabulary. So we all have them. We all have a couple of students who we are teaching our vocabulary lessons and the majority of our class is really doing well. And then there's these couple of kiddos and no matter what you do, they just don't seem to get the weekly words. And they're so far off that it can be puzzling. Excuse me, I've been struggling with a cold for a month, but I wanted to keep on going anyway, so I might cough a little bit, and I apologize. But I do want to chat with you about these struggling learners when it comes to vocabulary, because oftentimes there are learners who really need our vocabulary lessons the most, and yet they seem to be the ones that are understanding it the least. So I'm only going to briefly discuss my vocabulary routine as I have discussed it many times in blog posts and videos, but I do want you to get the basic idea of my vocabulary routine. I know lots of you use it, and having a routine is key. Having a routine is key for all of your students, but especially those struggling learners. So I'm going to go over that routine real quickly, and then I'm going to give you several suggestions that will help the struggling learners and even some of the other students in your class to better understand and use their vocabulary words. Okay, so here's the routine. Every week we do the same things. And I think this is key. It makes lesson planning easier. It makes it easier for students to know what to expect, be prepared, be on task, okay? So every Monday we introduce our new words. We get 5 new words every Monday. And on Mondays, we do sentences and definitions. And you can do it one of 2 ways, and I like to mix it up. Maybe one week you are giving them the definitions and they're using the definitions to help write a sentence. Maybe the next week you actually give them the sentences and they're using context clues from the sentences to try to come up with the definitions. The key though is that in the end, you're doing this as a class, or they're doing some pair sharing about what they think the word might mean, but at the end you need to make sure they have an accurate definition and an accurate sentence. So my students are either copying the definition and then we're working together to come up with a sentence and then they're going to write that sentence, or they copied the sentence, we're working together, we're coming up with what the definition might be, and then they're going to write the accurate definition into their vocabulary journals. Now on Tuesday, it's all about synonyms and antonyms. It's really important that you give students examples and non-examples of these words. Definitions alone are not often enough for our students to really grasp the meaning of the words. So every Tuesday, we work together to brainstorm about 2 synonyms and 2 antonyms for each of our vocabulary words. This helps most of my students to get a better understanding of what the word means. They're like, oh, I get it now, okay? And it's really good practice with synonyms and antonyms. Sometimes the synonym or the antonym is a new word to the student and the vocabulary word wasn't. And so it's just really expanding their base, their word knowledge base. And so it's really important. Wednesday, we take a little break from our 5 words on Wednesday. We've been working with the 5 words on Monday and Tuesday, and we take a short little break on Wednesday. And honestly, my students love Wednesdays. It was called Wow Wednesday. I don't know, because when you put the word wow in front of something, it's way more fun. And on Wednesday, we would work with prefixes and suffixes. I give my students a word that has either a prefix or a suffix or both, and we break it apart. We define the prefix, we define the root word, and then we brainstorm more words with the same prefix and more words with the same root so that we can again, broaden that base, word knowledge base. We're breaking apart words because we can't teach them every word there is to know out there. So we need to give them tools and strategies so that when they see unknown words in text, that there is a way for them to determine the meaning. Prefixes and suffixes are one really good way to determine the meaning of a word. So we're going to spend Wednesdays diving into what the different prefixes and suffixes mean, what different roots mean, so that they can use that in the future. And we're brainstorming a bunch of different words with prefixes and these roots or these suffixes, and my students are learning all kinds of things. They're going, oh, that's why that word means that. And they're also starting to see that you can't just add a prefix to every word. And that's an important lesson for my students. So Monday we did sentences and definitions with our new words. Tuesday we did synonyms and antonyms with our new words. Wednesday we were given one word and we broke it apart into the different affixes and roots, and we talked about that. Thursday is a fan favorite because on Thursday we draw a picture to represent each of our 5 vocabulary words. My students love this, and it's super valuable, especially for your struggling vocabulary learners. Seeing something, making it visual is really important for a lot of your learners. Some of my favorites, we had the word clutch, and a little girl drew a picture of a hand holding a purse. She said she's clutching the purse. And I said, did you know that small purses are called a clutch? And she was like, no, but now I get it. You're like holding it with your hand. And it connected all the dots for her. And she'll probably never forget the word clutch. And she's going to start using that word in her writing instead of just hold. She's going to say he was clutching something. So I loved that example. But drawing pictures. Now, if you give them a lot of time, they will take a lot of time. My kiddos only get 10 minutes, set a timer, and I have them draw in pencil, because also if they get out crayons and they're making it into like a Picasso type work of art, it can take way too long. So I tell them they've got 10 minutes, they need to sketch out a picture with their pencil. And if they have extra time at another point during their day, they can always go back and add color. But the picture dictionary, my students love it, and they remember the picture that they drew. All right, Fridays, we often do a little bit of a review game, and then we take our assessment every other Friday. The reason we do every other Friday is that students need to see and use words multiple times before it really becomes part of their memory. And so if we give kids words for just 1 week, they're not as likely to keep remembering them. You know, you've given that test on Friday and they seem to do fine, but 2 weeks later they have no clue what the word means. It's the same, can be the same with spelling. And so by stretching it out by 2 weeks, I saw my kids using the words more, remembering them for longer. Also, and when we were testing on 10 words, it added a little more of a challenge to it, and I thought that was important for the majority of my class. Okay, so that is my vocabulary routine in a nutshell. And that routine was amazing for about 90 to 95% of my class. They did exceptional. They were seeing their words in their books, in our passages, in our curriculum, and they were so excited because they remembered what it meant. And they were actually seeing the words in the text they read. So it meant more to them that they knew what it meant. It wasn't like just, these are words that we see in school stuff. This was real. I made vocabulary real for them. I do have vocabulary units for you. If you teach grades 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, I have units for you. They have all the words. They have all the sentences, the definitions. They have those wow words with the prefixes and suffixes. They have the vocabulary journal for the kiddos. They have all the assessments all ready to go for you, so you don't have to make all that up. I want to save you that kind of time. So if that is something you're interested in, I am leaving you the link so that you can check that out. But what I want to chat about now is that 5 or 10% of your kiddos, the couple of kiddos that you have that are still, even though you're doing this routine, don't seem to be connecting the dots and remembering their vocabulary words. How are we going to help them? I have a few really simple suggestions for you that I think will make a huge difference. First of all, I suggest possibly adding in some hand motions. If you have kiddos in your class who are struggling, sometimes adding in more movement helps them to remember things. Just like we added in a little bit of drawing, sometimes a little movement can help them. And this is a strategy that works for all students, but especially for those struggling learners. So for example, word is professional. How can we make a movement to help us remember professional? Well, a student might suggest taking a basketball and pretending to shoot the basketball, and he remembers that that is professional, like a professional basketball player. The movements should be simple, and then every time during the week and in the future, when you hear the word, when you say the word, you add in the motion, and so do your students. I think you will find that makes a big difference. Now, you don't have to do it for all words if that's too much. You could always do it for the words that you're noticing students particularly struggling with, and you might find that that helps them to really remember those words. All right, I have noticed that some of my students who are really struggling with vocabulary, they struggle to copy down the definition and sentences on day one. And so their journal isn't as good of a resource for them throughout the week and the year. And this can be for many different reasons. Some of my students struggling in vocabulary also have problems with reading and writing and are maybe dyslexic or even struggle with dysgraphia. And that makes it really hard to look up at the board, back down at your paper, and transfer up and down. They're worried about trying to spell it. They're struggling. They may not be getting it all copied down in time because it's taking them so much time going back and forth, looking at the letters, looking at the board. And so they're stressed, and they're not really thinking about the actual word. They're not really applying themselves and thinking about what it means because they're really stressing over getting it written down. And then later, it's kind of a mess. Sometimes handwriting is an issue and they didn't finish. It's all spelled wrong, and so they're not able to reference their book later. How we can help them with this is super simple. My units come with the teacher guide. All right, and the teacher guide has the sentence and the definition and the words for the teacher. If you have a kiddo or two really struggling, print the teacher guide out for them and give it to them on Monday. They should still be writing in their vocabulary journal because the act of writing helps them to memorize these words. But now that they have the paper right in front of them, it is easier for them to transfer, not easy, easier for them to transfer from that paper to their journal than it is all the way to the board. They are much more likely to get it written in. And if they don't, at least they still have a nice typed up version of all the sentences, definitions, synonyms, and antonyms that they could use to study from and reference later. They might have a folder where they keep those, somewhere they can reference them, maybe a page protector in their binder that they stick it in, that they can reference it. And then parents, family members also can see what the vocabulary words are and be able to read those definitions, sentences, and antonyms, synonyms. But it's so easy just to print an extra copy of the teacher guide. No extra planning necessary. Now he's just got an extra reference in front of him. And I think that makes a really big difference for certain kiddos, all right? And you may have one of those kiddos. All right, my next tip really can help all your students is to add in some vocabulary games into your center rotations whenever possible. I like to do it on Friday. That's when I have the time to add in some games. But playing with your words, seeing them over and over again, this really helps students versus just the memorizing the words. Okay, I'm going to read a definition. You tell me what word. But when they start playing with them, they're making these memories. It makes it easier for them later. I have tons of free vocabulary games for you. So that's going to be easy. I've got whole group type games like a bingo, and then I've got more small group games that your students can play in a center rotation. Also, if you have parents saying, hey, my students are really struggling with their vocabulary, you could even send home a game that they could play together. Now, the thing about games is that you can really decide which vocabulary words they're working with in that game. So you can go through their assessments and the words they were getting wrong, you can pick those to be the game cards. You can pick words that they haven't seen in a while that were earlier in the year, and you can change out the words as you want to. So I think that's a really neat way to differentiate your practice for vocabulary. But it's so simple and the kids love it. Playing games makes it feel like they're not actually working, and the reality is we know that they are. So I'm definitely leaving you a link for those free vocabulary games. Make sure you grab them. All right, another simple way that you might want to differentiate for certain students, and you don't need to do this for every student, but for some students you may want to differentiate the assessment. My assessments include 5 multiple choice and 5 fill in the blank. First grade is a little bit different, but the fill in the blank are a lot more challenging for most students. And so if you're noticing, wow, okay, they're routinely missing all the fill in the blank ones, then you could actually have them only do the top multiple choice ones. Other alternatives even for modifying the assessment is instead of having them do an every other week assessment, have them do a once a week assessment. You could use Google Classroom to make a quick multiple choice assessment that they quick do every Friday afternoon, and it would self-grade for you if you did that. But modifying the assessment a little bit might be something you need to do if you have a kiddo who just, this is a real struggle for them, okay? Other options, if you've really tried all these things and they're still struggling, is fewer words. So grades 2 through 5 are getting 5 words. Perhaps your kiddo, you want to take them to 3 words for now. And get to the point where they can do so well with those 3 words, and then maybe halfway through the year they'll be ready for 4 words. But the reality is that I would rather have my struggling learner learn 3 words well than to have 5 words that they just mix up every single time, okay? So if you've tried a lot of different things, you've modified the assessments, and you've added in some games, you're printing the teacher directions, and we're just still not quite there, cut back the words for a period of time and see if that helps any. Again, Google Classroom can help you to make a simple assessment for them with those 3 words. You just need to know, have they learned those 3 words? Once you see that they're having some success with that, you're giving them a lot of compliments for that success, add in a 4th word. And see if maybe by the end of the year you can get to the point where they're up to the 5 words. Last tip, and I've mentioned it already, but sometimes using technology really helps those students who are struggling with their vocabulary. A favorite that even my own children still use is Quizlet. Quizlet lets you make like little flashcards and have a little like quiz game basically, and it's perfect for vocabulary words where you can put in the word and the definition and it will quiz them. But there's just something fun about it being on their iPad or their device that, you know, when you're just using paper and pencil, that it lacks. And when you make it fun and students are more willing to do it, then they're going to learn more. Also, I've mentioned a couple different times, but Google Classroom is another good one. Spelling City, it is a paid subscription, but if you're already using it for spelling or your school has purchased it, that can be another great option to use for practicing your vocabulary words with your whole class or just those who are struggling. Okay, so a couple ideas that I gave you. Again, have a routine for teaching vocabulary. We don't want to just give words each week and then test on Friday. We do want to be teaching the words throughout the week and practicing them with our students. That's key. But if we have some students who are struggling, you might try adding in some hand motions. You might try printing out the teacher direction sheet for Monday to make it easier for them to copy the definitions and the sentences. You might want to add in some games, either whole group or in centers. I've got some free ones for you. You might want to modify the assessments and not include the fill in the blanks if those are really tripping your students up. Or you might want to modify by just using fewer words. Instead of 5, go back to 3. Also, adding in technology can make vocabulary practice extra fun for your students. Again, I do have vocabulary units to make this routine super simple for you and your students, and I am dropping you a link for those units. All right, guys, enjoy your week. I can't wait to chat with you again. Bye.